You felt it long before you understood it. The shift, the tension, the strange resistance that followed you into rooms you never tried to dominate. You are not imagining it. You are not dramatic. You are not overly sensitive. You are marked, chosen, set apart in ways most people will never comprehend. Listen carefully. There are forces that recognize your assignment before you do. There are environments that react to your presence before you speak. And there are people who try to erase what they cannot control. You have lived this. You have walked into spaces quietly and felt the temperature change. You have watched conversations pause, watched smiles tighten, watched energy rearrange itself around you. You wondered why. You questioned yourself, but deep down you knew. This was not normal. You are not ordinary. And this message is not for everyone. Only the chosen will feel this confirmation rising in their spirit right now. There are 9 signs, 9 confirmations, 9 revelations that what looked like erasure was actually divine magnification. Not everyone will stay for this truth. But if you feel the weight of it already, you know this is for you. Stay locked in. Lean forward. Because what you thought was suppression was preparation. What you thought was rejection was revelation. And what they tried to silence is about to become undeniable. First, the more they tried to silence you, the louder your presence became in the spirit. You remember the moments. They ignored your ideas. They talked over you. They excluded you from rooms you helped build. They pretended you were invisible. And yet, something strange kept happening. The atmosphere would not cooperate with their narrative. Even when you said nothing, your presence spoke. Even in silence, you carried weight. Have you noticed that you can sit quietly and still shift a room? You can withdraw and still be discussed. You can be absent and still be felt. That is not ego. That is anointing. What they meant to diminish began exposing your spiritual gravity. The harder they tried to suppress you, the more obvious it became that you were different. Because ordinary people can be ignored, chosen ones cannot. The enemy does not waste warfare on the irrelevant. Silence was their strategy, but heaven was amplifying you. They thought removing your voice would weaken you. Instead, it forced your energy to speak louder. And here is the deeper truth. When someone tries to erase you, it is because your signature threatens their structure. Your clarity unsettles confusion. Your light irritates darkness. Your presence exposes insecurity. So they attempt erasure. But erasure requires power. And they never had that power over you. They never did. Your voice carries authority beyond permission. You do not need validation to be valid. You do not need acknowledgement to be anointed. You do not need applause to be appointed. Read that again in your spirit. The very effort to silence you revealed how necessary you are. Because if you were small, they would not react. If you were common, they would not resist. If you were forgettable, they would not strategize. But they did. And that is your confirmation. You are not too much. You are too powerful for small containers. Stand firm. Do not shrink. Do not dim. Because what tried to silence you has already failed. And this is only the beginning. Second, isolation was forced on you, but it activated your inner throne. You remember when the invitation slowed down, when the calls stopped, when support quietly disappeared. You felt the shift. People who once stood close began standing at a distance. You were not included, not defended, not understood, and it hurt. Let that be acknowledged. It hurt. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you had done something wrong. You wondered if you were too intense, too different, too much. But listen carefully. They withdrew because your growth made them uncomfortable. They stepped back because your light exposed their stagnation. They thought loneliness would weaken you. They thought silence would shrink you. They thought isolation would make you doubt your calling. But something unexpected happened. You did not collapse. You did not disappear. You went inward. And in that inward place, something ancient awakened. In the quiet, your discernment sharpened. In the solitude, your identity crystallized. When the noise faded, you started hearing differently. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped negotiating your essence. And you started listening to God, truly listening. Have you noticed that when the crowd left, clarity arrived? When validation disappeared, instruction began. When support was stripped, strategy was revealed. That was not abandonment. That was initiation. Darkness thought it was isolating you. Heaven was enthroning you. Because a throne is not built in public applause. A throne is built in private refinement. You were being trained to stand alone. You were being strengthened to lead without consensus. You were being prepared to carry weight without needing reassurance. The world calls it rejection, but the Spirit calls it consecration. You felt alone, but you were being set apart. There is a difference. Isolation without purpose is despair. Isolation with assignment is elevation. You were not being removed, you were being repositioned. Only the chosen recognize this pattern. When you could no longer lean on others, you leaned into your anointing. When people withdrew their voices, you discovered your own authority. When they left you in silence, you found your throne in the Spirit. And now you are different, quieter but stronger, less reactive, more rooted, less needy, more knowing. They thought they were reducing you, but they were refining you. They thought they were leaving you behind, but they were pushing you ahead. Because once you learn to stand alone with God, you cannot be manipulated by the crowd. Once you discover your inner throne, you stop begging for seats at tables. You build your own. This was warfare, but it was also favor. This was pain, but it was also promotion. Stand firm in that truth. Your isolation was not evidence of failure. It was confirmation of destiny. And what awakened in you during that lonely season cannot be undone. It cannot be silenced. It cannot be erased. It has only begun. Third, smear campaigns backfired and revealed your integrity. You saw it happen. Whispers started. Stories twisted. Your name carried in rooms you were not in. Accusations formed without evidence. Narratives shaped without truth. And for a moment, it felt suffocating. You felt exposed, misunderstood, misrepresented. You wondered how something so false could spread so quickly. You wondered why darkness seemed so organized. But listen carefully. If you were insignificant, they would not need a strategy. If you were ordinary, they would not need a narrative. Smear campaigns are not random. They are reactions. Reactions to light, reactions to presence, reactions to integrity that convicts without speaking. They tried to stain you. They tried to brand you with distortion. But something happened. The lies did not stick. The contradictions surfaced. The inconsistencies exposed themselves. Because deception cannot sustain itself around someone who carries truth. Darkness is loud, but it is unstable. Light is quiet, but it is unshakable. Have you noticed how people began watching more closely? Not you, them, the accusers, the storytellers, the manipulators. Those who once doubted you started sensing something was off. Their spirit felt the misalignment. Their intuition questioned the narrative. Because truth has a frequency, and your life carries it. You did not defend yourself aggressively. You did not chase every rumor. You stood still, and that stillness was power. The enemy expected panic. The enemy expected emotional collapse. The enemy expected you to fight in the flesh, but you did not. You remained anchored, and that anchoring exposed everything. What they meant to use against you became evidence for you. Every attack unintentionally testified to your difference, because smear campaigns require exaggeration, and exaggeration reveals fear. They would not exaggerate you if you were not impactful. They would not distort you if you were not influential. They would not attempt character assassination if your character was not strong. Understand this. When darkness tries to redefine you, it is because it cannot control you. When they attempt to rewrite your story, it is because your real story threatens their comfort. And the more they pushed, the clearer your integrity became. Pressure reveals structure, heat reveals purity, opposition reveals authenticity. You did not break. You did not bend. You did not become what they accused. You became stronger, more disciplined, more aware, more discerning. This was warfare, but it was also unveiling. Because the chosen are not protected from slander. They are revealed through it. You are not defined by rumor, you are refined by resistance. And now people see differently. They see your consistency. They see your restraint. They see your stability. And that stability speaks louder than any accusation ever could. Stand firm. Do not chase approval. Do not explain what God has already established. The smear did not damage your signature. It highlighted it. And what is coming next will make that even clearer. Fourth, your absence created a void they could not replace. You stepped back. Maybe not dramatically. Maybe not loudly. You just withdrew your energy. You stopped overextending. You stopped fixing what was not yours to fix. You stopped carrying what was never assigned to you. And then it happened. Things started malfunctioning. Conversations lost direction. Projects slowed down. Confusion increased. The atmosphere shifted again. But this time, it was not resistance. It was instability. Have you noticed that when you were present, there was order? When you were engaged, there was clarity. When you were invested, there was momentum. You were not just participating, you were stabilizing. And they did not see it until you were gone. They thought you were optional, replaceable, interchangeable. But your signature is not generic. Your anointing is not mass-produced. Your discernment is not downloadable. You carry something specific, something precise, something that cannot be duplicated by effort or imitated by performance. When you removed yourself, the system revealed its dependence on you. That is not ego. That is evidence. Darkness assumed it could function without your light. But darkness always overestimates itself. When light withdraws, shadows multiply. When clarity leaves, confusion grows. When the chosen step back, the structure shakes. You were the stabilizer, not because you were loud, not because you demanded recognition, but because you were aligned. Alignment creates order. Integrity creates foundation. Presence creates balance. And when that presence leaves, instability is exposed. They underestimated you. They minimized you. They convinced themselves they could replicate you. But replication is not creation. Imitation is not impartation. You cannot copy what God uniquely designed. And now they feel it. The gap, the absence, the missing piece. What they removed became the very thing they needed. And here is the deeper revelation. God allowed you to step back so the void would be undeniable. Because as long as you were filling the gaps, they could pretend you were not essential. As long as you were compensating for dysfunction, they could deny your value. But when you stopped, reality spoke. You are not called to be consumed. You are called to be recognized. You are not assigned to sustain systems that dishonor you. You are assigned to build what aligns with you. Let that settle. You are not the extra. You are the anchor. You are not the background. You are the balance. And once you see that you will never overextend yourself again, do not rush back to stabilize what dismissed you. Do not volunteer to repair what refused to respect you. Stand still. Let the void teach them. Let the absence preach. Because when the chosen withdraw, heaven is making a statement. And this is only intensifying. Fifth, the pressure intensified instead of disappearing. You thought once you endured the isolation, it would calm down. You thought once the smear collapsed, it would quiet. You thought once you stepped back, the tension would fade. But it didn't. It increased. The resistance grew sharper. The warfare grew more strategic. The opposition became more intentional. And for a moment you asked yourself, why is this not easing up? Hear this clearly. Ordinary people get ignored. Chosen ones get opposed. No one fights what poses no threat. No one mobilizes against what carries no power. The escalation is not punishment. It is confirmation. The warfare intensified because your calling intensified. Your awareness expanded. Your discernment sharpened. Your confidence stabilized. And as you grew, the resistance adjusted. Darkness studies movement. It reacts to expansion. And you have been expanding. Even when you felt tired. Even when you felt misunderstood. Even when you felt alone. You were still growing. And growth attracts resistance. But resistance also reveals value. Have you noticed that every new level of clarity brought a new level of tension? Every time you broke an old pattern, pressure followed. Every time you refused to shrink, opposition rose. That is not coincidence. That is proportion. Resistance increases in proportion to expansion. Pressure rises in proportion to purpose. The enemy does not waste energy. If the pressure is increasing, it is because your impact is increasing. If the attacks are sharper, it is because your influence is sharper. If the warfare is strategic, it is because your assignment is strategic. This is the pivot. You are not just surviving something, you are carrying something. Something weighty, something eternal, something disruptive to darkness. Heaven magnifies what hell tries hardest to erase. Let that sink in. The more they tried to delete you, the more visible your signature became. The more they tried to compress you, the more concentrated your power became. Pressure does not destroy diamonds, it reveals them. And you have been under pressure, but you did not shatter. You crystallized. You became more defined, more focused, more spiritually dangerous. You are no longer confused by resistance. You recognize it. You understand it. You see it for what it is. Evidence, proof, confirmation. The escalation is not random, it is reactive. Your presence is shifting things. Your growth is disrupting patterns. Your stability is exposing fragility around you. That is why it feels heavier. But listen carefully. Heavier does not mean losing. Heavier means rising. Stand firm. Do not interpret pressure as defeat. Interpret it as proximity. You are getting closer. Closer to influence. Closer to authority. Closer to undeniable manifestation. And if this is what pressure feels like, what will power feel like? Then you became more authentic under attack. They tried to reshape you, subtly at first. Suggestions, corrections, warnings. You should tone it down. You should be less intense. You should fit the culture. You heard it. You felt it. The pressure to adjust. The pressure to dilute. The pressure to become more digestible. And for a moment, you considered it. Because you are not rebellious by nature. You are thoughtful, you are aware, you are discerning, but something inside you refused to bend completely. Something deeper would not surrender. Have you noticed that every attempt to shrink you forced you to define yourself? Every time they tried to label you, you clarified your own identity. Every time they tried to confine you, you discovered your edges. Attack did not blur you, it sharpened you. Suppression did not erase you, it refined you. You stopped shrinking to fit spaces designed to contain you. You stopped softening your truth to keep others comfortable. You stopped editing your light to protect fragile egos. That was not arrogance, that was alignment. Darkness prefers diluted light. But you are not diluted, you are distinct. They wanted you filtered. God made you focused. They wanted you manageable. God made you marked. And the more they pressed you, the more concentrated you became. Pressure does not reduce essence. It intensifies it. What they tried to compress became concentrated power. You feel it now, a different steadiness, a clearer voice, a firmer presence. You no longer apologize for your depth. You no longer negotiate your conviction. You no longer explain your fire to people who prefer lukewarm, because you understand something now. Containment was never your assignment. Expansion was. You are not here to blend. You are here to stand out. You are not here to echo. You are here to originate. And every attempt to reshape you was evidence that your original design carries weight. Why would darkness try to mold you if your natural form was harmless? Why would systems pressure you if your authenticity was not disruptive? Because authenticity threatens imitation. And you are not a copy. You are a signature, raw, unmistakable, eternal. Under attack, you did not become weaker. You became clearer. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you carry. Clear about what you will never again tolerate. This is spiritual reinforcement. This is identity elevation. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to who you were always meant to be. Unfiltered, unapologetic, uncontainable. Stand in that. Do not retreat into smaller versions of yourself. Do not adjust to environments that fear your intensity. You were attacked because you are authentic. And now that authenticity carries authority. And what is unfolding next will make that authority undeniable. Seventh, unexpected doors opened where you were never expected to enter. You felt the sting of the door that closed. Publicly, loudly, almost theatrically. It looked final. It looked humiliating. It looked like loss. People watched. Some celebrated. Some whispered. You stood there wondering if that was the end of something you had built. But while that door slammed in front of witnesses, another one opened quietly. No announcement, no spotlight, no applause, just access. Have you noticed that opportunities began appearing in places you never targeted? Conversations started in unfamiliar territories. Invitations arrived from unexpected directions. Spaces that never knew your story welcomed your presence. Favor showed up where your name had not been distorted. That is not coincidence. That is strategy. When erasure failed in one realm, elevation was triggered in another. Darkness thought it cornered you. Heaven repositioned you. The closed door was not punishment, it was redirection. Because some spaces could only see you through rumor, but other spaces see you through resonance, and resonance cannot be manipulated. Influence expanded beyond the boundaries of the smear. Your reach widened beyond the limits of their narrative. You were underestimated locally, but you were recognized globally. You were restricted in one circle, but released into another. And the expansion felt different. Less forced, less political, more aligned, more organic. You were not striving, you were stepping into rooms that carried peace instead of pressure, stepping into environments that valued your authenticity instead of fearing it, stepping into connections that felt ordained rather than negotiated. This is how favor works. It does not argue, it redirects. It does not beg for entry, it opens gates. You thought losing that space meant shrinking, but it meant widening. You thought being erased there meant being forgotten, but it meant being introduced somewhere greater. Because your signature is not territorial, it is transferable. It is not limited by geography, it is activated by alignment. And once alignment begins, acceleration follows. You are not confined to one platform. You are not dependent on one system. You are not limited to one audience. You carry something portable, something that thrives wherever it is planted. That is why new doors opened without your effort, because heaven will not allow your signature to remain hidden. Erasure in one realm triggered elevation in another. Let that settle. The door that rejected you was never your destiny. It was a test of attachment, and you passed. Now you are moving differently, less desperate, more discerning, less attached to platforms, more anchored in purpose. And this is only expanding. What opened quietly will soon become visible, and when it does, it will confirm everything. Eighth, those who tried to delete you began watching you closely. You felt it, the shift in their energy, the silence that was no longer dismissive, but observant. The same voices that once minimized you grew quieter, not because they stopped caring, but because they started noticing. You were no longer being ignored. You were being monitored. Have you sensed that views without comments, attention without acknowledgement, conversations that pause when you enter, eyes that track your movement? This is not paranoia. This is pattern. Dismissal turned into surveillance because your growth became undeniable. You did not collapse under pressure. You did not fade after rejection. You did not disappear after isolation. You expanded. And expansion unsettles those who predicted your decline. They expected your silence to be permanent. They expected your confidence to erode. They expected your absence to weaken you. Instead, you emerged sharper, more stable, more aligned. And now they are watching, not to celebrate, not to applaud, but to measure, to calculate, to understand what they failed to erase. Darkness studies what it cannot control, and you are no longer controllable. Your growth carries something irreversible. That is what they sense. Irreversibility, momentum that cannot be undone, clarity that cannot be confused, authority that cannot be dismissed. They feel it, even if they never say it. The narrative has shifted from "they will fade" to "they are not fading," from "they are too much" to silent acknowledgement. Because denial requires evidence, and your consistency destroyed their denial. You kept moving, you kept building, you kept evolving while they watched. And the watching is proof. If you were truly erased, there would be nothing to observe. If you were truly irrelevant, there would be nothing to monitor. But they are paying attention because something in you is becoming unstoppable. This is the pressure before breakthrough. This is the tension before manifestation. When opposition becomes observant, elevation is near. Do not be intimidated by the watching. Do not shrink because eyes are on you. Stand taller, move wiser, speak clearer. Because the very ones who tried to write you off are now witnessing your transformation. And witnessing creates conviction. Conviction creates acknowledgement. Acknowledgement creates inevitability. You are no longer fighting for visibility. You are becoming undeniable. And what is about to unfold next will not just be watched, it will be witnessed. Ninth, the attempted erasure activated your eternal signature, and now it cannot be contained. This is the part they did not anticipate. They thought pressure would bury you. They thought silence would erase you. They thought isolation would weaken you. But what they meant to bury has been engraved in eternity. Do you understand what that means? You were not being deleted. You were being defined. Every attack carved clarity into you. Every betrayal etched identity deeper into your spirit. Every closed door sealed your uniqueness in a way that can never be reversed. Your difference is no longer negotiable. It is ordained. There was a time you questioned it, a time you tried to adjust it, a time you wondered if you should soften it. Not anymore. Now you know. You were never meant to blend. You were meant to blaze. The attack was not sent to destroy you. It was allowed to reveal you. Because some signatures only become visible under fire. Some callings only awaken under conflict. Some authority only surfaces under opposition. You are not who you were when this started. You are clearer, sharper, more dangerous to darkness. The Erasure attempt triggered activation. The compression triggered concentration. The resistance triggered revelation. And now something irreversible has happened. You cannot go back. You cannot shrink again. You cannot pretend you do not see what you now see. You have stepped into awareness, and awareness changes everything. The very forces that tried to erase you must now witness your magnified destiny. They will see what they tried to suppress. They will watch what they tried to silence. They will observe what they attempted to delete. Not because you sought revenge, but because God does not waste warfare. What was meant as cancellation became confirmation. What was meant as burial became branding. Your eternal signature is active, uncontainable, unapologetic, unstoppable. This is not hype. This is sealing. You are no longer fighting to survive. You are positioned to reign. You are no longer reacting to darkness. You are advancing with light. Stand in it. Own it. Walk in it without hesitation. You are chosen, not temporarily, not conditionally, but eternally. Protected, assigned, marked beyond reversal. Every struggle prepared you. Every tear trained you. Every season of confusion clarified you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Nothing was accidental. If this message confirmed what you have been feeling, declare it boldly. Comment the number 9. Seal it. Make it public. Let darkness know you recognize the activation. Subscribe if you have not, because this is not the end of your unfolding. This is the beginning of manifestation. You were never ordinary. You were never erasable. You were always eternal. And what is marked by God cannot be erased by man. Stand firm. Move forward. Your signature is alive, and nothing formed against you will contain it.